Gonna go. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, everybody out there that's listening. I hope that you're listening and that you're unstressed about everything. I think things are starting to look up. That depends on which, I guess, how you're thinking or what your ideology is. But I feel that there's some relief coming, with laws and all this other stuff that's happening right now. But I'm not going to talk politics, but I do want to talk politics about uh, the disclosure. And I got two books, of course, and I know a little bit about it. It's What Do They Want? That was my first book, so I know a little bit about that disclosure stuff because I've been disclosed when I was 13 years of age. I think Brian has too. And here's my new book, We Were Supposed to Meet. It's a love story from out of this world's Palladium Princess and a Native American man that is the hero of the book, and it's a sci-fi, but it adds a little bit of what my experience from the book, first book, What Do They Want, and it adds my other book, Senseless Wars, and I've been in combat and everything, so I added that all together in this book and combined all the experiences into this book. So but I'm glad to have a guy today that I've had on the show before. Very interesting guy, and it's he knows a lot of details about things, and he can explain to us about disclosure. His name is Brian Tseng. He co-organized the 2023 Montauk Adventure Tour, and he did that this year too. I think this is a an older bio, and he assembled survivors of its Montauk Project for the 80th anniversary. I think that's 80th or 60th,
It was
uh,
the 80th anniversary.
80th of the related Philadelphia experiment. Okay, he co-hosts Live Disclosure Now YouTube channel with Arkham Raw, with the mission of forcing. I'm not don't have too much light here, Brian.
That's okay. Forcing full disclosure
Yeah,
of secret access programs and deep underground bases and the like, so that we can achieve our Star Trek future with
right.
the public knowing the reality of ETs and the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right. In the studio, I turned the light down. Now I can't read my my print, my
No
text.
worries, no worries, and I'm
Yeah,
happy to share my own bio. I
right.
can give the audience a rundown as well.
And you're a producer for the 2024 Full Disclosure Now conference. And that was just held here a while back at St. Pete Beach. You'll have to tell us about that and how that all comes out. But you're the executive, you're working with executive team to produce next year's event, and you're going to have one in 2025, I guess, at the same time and place, given the huge success of your previous years. And you also are still working on your full disclosure movement, working with targeted individuals and exopolitics situation, Montauk Project, and such. You can tell us how you've been coming about, how this is all coming about, and how year after year you're probably gaining more and more strength, and you're probably closer to disclosure than Dr. Greer or President Trump right now. They're
Well,
not
I don't know about President Trump. I'd say less filtered than Dr. Greer for sure. I'm coming to the full disclosure movement as an advocate and organizer from the medical field, primarily working with doctors and nurses to fight, insurance company and government policies that lead to medical denials and hospital shutdowns. While we're getting ripped off with our taxpayer money in criminal fashion, and the so-called authorities are not only looking the other way, they're having their own pockets lined. And bringing that experience of 5 years full-time volunteer and then 3 years part-time volunteer to the full disclosure movement as of about 2020 to now,
no.
like full-time. And then I've been a lifelong you know X-Files person, and seeking for the truth, and now I feel that I've found it, as especially as of 2021, 2022. And it's my mission with so many in our community to share that with the rest of the world.
Yeah, I know you've been doing a great job, and I know you've been working at this. And what is it that it's not on your bio, but you've had some background in I guess medical procedures and things of that nature. Could you tell us
And
a
not
little about that?
well, not procedures,
Not
it's
procedure, yeah.
community organizing of the doctors
Right.
who work in hospitals that are being taken over by corporations that are supposedly nonprofits, and they don't pay any taxes while overcharging for care, taking over the poor hospitals in the low income parts of town, grabbing up all the higher or more lucrative doctors and their practices with the higher paying patients, and scooping them up to their ivory tower hospitals or ebony tower hospitals, whatever you want to say, in the nice parts of town, like San Francisco. And then shutting down the poor hospitals they took over for pennies on the dollar that they've already looted, leaving the community high and dry. And when the people scream at them, they just laugh, continue to get their nonprofit tax breaks, and no one's the wiser. What we do in a situation like that is not only do we organize the doctors and the nurses at that hospital, and then the patients and the restaurant owners who their businesses depend on the lunch and the dinner rushes,
Right.
and breakfast, and the local students and the universities who want to become med students and want to get involved, you know, we organize all of them, and we don't throw them at, say, Sutter Health Corporation or Kaiser Health, a supposed nonprofits that are looting our medical system. What we do is we throw them at the politicians and we say, hey, supervisor so and so, supervisor so and so, why are you getting campaign funding to be a supervisor again for another 4 years from Sutter Health when you're telling your own constituency who voted for you that you care about them as they shut down the hospital in the neighborhood?
Right. So
Okay.
you're talking about a lot of, I guess, city people, aldermans, mayors, and also other,
Yeah.
maybe other politicians getting
Well,
in.
this is really getting into when you want to fight any fight and act systemically on a larger basis, you don't just go all the way to the top. You don't just jump in the ring with Mike Tyson. I'm not talking old Mike Tyson, young Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Okay, first you start as low as possible at the local level. So for the San Francisco Bay Area, okay, or the city and county of San Francisco rather, that's the city supervisors and the mayor. Okay. And then above them, then you've got the California representatives and senators, and then above, and that's at the federal level, state and federal level.
Right.
Okay, with the assemblies, and then, sorry, that's state, and then up to the federal level with the congressman. And so, um, what we did is we looked at the principles, the weak points, how you can take forces in motion and go from, yeah, we're some people and we're in the neighborhood and doctors and community, but we don't have that much money. A lot of these people are actually struggling versus these multi-million dollar hospital corporations. How do you fight that?
Right.
Well, you look at their weak points. In our case, we identified their nonprofit tax status that Sutter Health in this case was receiving, while violating all these nonprofit conditions, that things that they're supposed to be doing to receive tax benefits, they're violating left and right. They're violating their own agreements. Okay. And by putting pressure on the supervisors to then revoke Sutter's nonprofit status at the local level, and then at the state assembly level for the state of California, and then ultimately, it didn't even get that far. It would have been at the congressional level and with the IRS to revoke their nonprofit status. All of a sudden, their nonprofit tax breaks go bye-bye. Billions of dollars of just
Oh.
empire is now jeopardized.
Now, does your organization, I guess you don't have the authority, legal authority to go after these people, but do you turn these names over or these people suspected, corrupted, I guess politicians, you turn them over to the district attorney or to law?
Well, so no, you don't rely on the district attorney of the corrupt state or city, and county to do anything. And that was my organizing career, community, and medical organizing from 2003 to 2011. Here we are, going from 2020 to 2025 now.
Right.
We shifted gears a bit in terms of the full disclosure movement. But so I'm just kind of, you asked a bit about my medical organizing background, but it's appropriate to know that background to understand that a lot of the methodology that I learned there of what works and what doesn't, and how do you organize people on principles, and start out with like little resources and help to generate that through people power. I'm applying all that to the full disclosure movement.
Okay, now this Bobby Kennedy is coming into, he's going to look at the food, he's going to look at the drug, the big pharmaceutical companies, big pharma, and he's going to start busting balls. I guess that's his job, and he's really delighted in doing it. What do you think about him, Brian, doing this job?
I mean, I feel really great about him. Um, you know, the Kennedy family's had a rough one, as we all know,
Right.
for many, many decades, and so he has a vested interest. I mean, they took out his uncle and then his own father.
Mhm.
His own life has been under threat for his whole life.
Right.
Um, the Kennedys are apparently a bloodline family. So I put him in the category of people in the bloodline families who they want an end to this. They don't like it. And I think he'd be, you can also have black sheep of these bloodline families. Just because you're of a bloodline doesn't mean that you're, you know, welcomed with open arms and you're part of that power structure. Not at all. Not
Right.
necessarily.
I heard there's a couple of nephews in the Kennedy family that want to stray, I guess, drugs and things of that nature, but that's dropping the DNA levels, I guess, a little lower. But
Well,
I
you never know. But that's the thing. If it's a bloodline family, you never know what's going on.
right,
Just like with Hollywood, I remember growing up and watching the Facts of Life for Different Strokes kids, being parodied on Saturday Night Live for going on these cocaine and alcohol fueled crime binges because they were spoiled Hollywood kids. What do you know now? It turns out a lot of them were Disney-fied or Nickelodeoned, and they were satanically, ritually abused at a young age, and that's why they're shaving their hair and getting drunk and getting into car accidents in their Lamborghinis,
right.
you know.
I want to see, and the things that they're talking about in our food, the plastics and things of that nature is horrendous. And you feel like not eating anything. You wonder, is there something or people behind this, like a cabal, that are trying to scare us from eating food so we starve to death? I
Well, it's
don't
not
know,
that they're trying
Brian.
to scare us. It's not that they're trying to scare us from eating food. They're trying to poison our food so that we get poisoned and starve to death.
Right.
And so for anyone who studies the Illuminati, the cabal, Operation Lockstep, the Rockefeller plan, the Iron Mountain plan, Agenda 2030, I mean, they say this over and over and over. So it's not like they have not, at this point, they haven't made a secret of it. I mean, they don't necessarily talk about it openly on CNN and their ABC, their lamestream outlets, etc. But
Yeah.
they've already lined this out. Their whole plan, and the Georgia Guidestones, that's partly why they literally wrote it in stone,
Yeah.
was to get the population down to 500 million.
And who
And so,
destroyed it? Do you wonder who destroyed it with the
well,
bomb?
my understanding is um it may actually have been certain of the Illuminati themselves where there's like two different factions and they're fighting against each other, and they saw it wasn't being implemented anyway and they may have done it. It might have been white hats. It's either of those. I don't think it was like the main nasty black hats who actually want that to happen. I don't think they self-destructed. I think they were either attacked from enemies on their own side or enemies on Team Light.
Right. Do you think a lot of the problems that we're having right now, like political problems, like a lot of politicians are puppets, and the ones that you're talking about the medical stuff and the charity, I think a lot of them were just puppets. They're front people, and they get paid off. I can just imagine a lot of them are walking away with their back pockets full of cash. That's what my thoughts are. I think
Well,
there's a lot of
let's do
corruption.
let's do it like this. Because it's really hard to just lump them all together, because then you get into, well, if everyone's in on the secret, how do they keep it such a great secret?
Right.
And the way it's kind of like this, you've got the minions who are the useful idiots, they're paid off, and they're really only existing at the 3D level. Like for the people at the way top to milk the medical system, they don't need everybody to be an Illuminati initiate. They just need you to follow the business plan as their employee collecting a paycheck in whatever, in this case, hospital corporation that's a supposed nonprofit. But then they might own a real estate corporation over here that deals with, selling off the land for the poor hospitals that they bought up at pennies on the dollar. They scrapped the hospital, and then now they've got high end real estate to sell.
Right.
Okay.
I know that you work from a lot of facts because you do a lot of boots on the ground work, but these platforms are kind of sensitive to issues that we're talking about. So I'm just going to say this is for entertainment purposes
Oh,
only,
yes. Yep.
to kind of put a disclaimer there because I know you have facts, but you haven't presented it to the law to prove it. And I have
Oh, I've been to hearings. I mean, the stuff I'm talking, the medical stuff up Sutter. I've been to hearings. I've testified. This is all matter of public record. This is, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you got facts, and we can talk on facts. And I guess the platforms have to accept that because you put the work behind it, and you got some some claims there. But I know that there are a lot of things they're saying, like conspiracy theories. Most conspiracy theories have been coming true. Don't you believe that, Brian?
Yes, yes, and because the whole thing is, I mean, I can't even, I don't even like the name conspiracy theorist. I consider myself to be a conspiracy realist
Okay.
because these are real conspiracies. And the problem is that people write off things as, oh, that's just a conspiracy. Well, the definition of a conspiracy is a group of people working together, generally secretively towards, a shared end that is generally kept from the public. That's a conspiracy as far as I understand it. So to say something is a conspiracy and say, yeah, you've got a group of people who are working secretly for nefarious purposes that are against our interests, the people,
Right.
the rest of the world and society. I don't even know why. To me, it's kind of like the people who laugh at the knee-jerk response to the conspiracy term. To me, it's the fluoride stare. They've been Bart Simpson conditioned, and
Mhm.
I feel for them because those are the people who, my favorite Robert Kiyosaki quote, the guy, the author of Rich Dad Poor
Right.
Dad,
Mhm.
okay, is that the closer you are to the truth, the wealthier you are. Not just money or physical wealth, but health, spiritually, happiness, right?
Mhm.
And all the people who write off these things as conspiracies, I see all those people, they're miserable. They're not happy. They're not thriving. Okay. They're making bad decisions. They're listening to the authorities, so-called authorities, when they shouldn't be. And when those authorities now 4 years later are shown to be criminal and genocidal in many a case. Um, I actually turn it around and say to anyone who calls someone else a conspiracy theorist as a smear. I mean, number one, check the scoreboard. As you were saying, we've been vindicated most of the time,
Right.
I'd say.
Yeah, UFOs and I've been writing books, been doing shows about UFOs and ETs, and I feel vindicated because the government's actually admitting a lot of it. The Pentagon actually admitted that there's ET bases under the ocean, like on the Atlantic coast side and then also Pacific coast side outside of San Diego.
Well,
They've actually,
sections of the
yeah,
government, because you go to the Pentagon, one side will spill that kind of tea, and then the other will deny it.
yeah.
And it's the same Pentagon. Well, but is it? It's different wings of the Pentagon.
Hence, we don't have full disclosure because they're fighting each other. Yeah,
That's part of it. That's a big part of it. And that's at the more the military level. But
yeah,
then we also have it at the more um, financial and political, um, cultural rulers of society. And
right.
then that's where some want to embrace a more transhumanism future and others don't. They all maybe want to agree they want to rule the world, but they don't necessarily agree on what that vision looks like and which buddies are going to be next to them when ruling the world.
Right. Let's take it back a little bit. You work with a lot of people that experienced Montauk and they're Montauk experiencers. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Brian? And then we'll get into the drones, what's going on in the air now, and then we'll finish up with that disclosure ideas that you might have. I know that's why I wanted to talk to you because you keep up on a lot of this stuff, and I enjoy talking to you. Brian, tell us a little bit about the Montauk experiencers and what you found out about all that.
Yeah. So for 2023, I co-organized the Montauk Adventure Tour with James Rink and a whole bunch of others in the community, um, because it was the 80th anniversary of the Philadelphia experiment. That's where they took the USS Eldridge and put two Tesla coils, one on either end, and tore a hole in time and space, and it was a really bad voyage for the sailors on board, unfortunately.
Right.
From there, the U.S. government, the military, they decided to continue experimentation with this type of technology, um, time and warp travel, at Brookhaven National Laboratory, on the middle of Long Island, New York. And then they eventually moved it to Camp Hero Army Base, on the very far east end of Long Island, New York, in Montauk.
Right.
And when we were there, we had James Rink, Arkeem Ra, Chastity Campbell. Um, Let me see, um, Alondra Markman. Um, so another person who's not public, so I don't want to say his name. Um, and there were more people. Angel Song. So that's five, six right there, and I've got a couple more. But just those six right there, they, as we were walking and touring Camp Hero Army Base on the surface at least, because it's got a whole underground facility under the bunkers. They were having different recalls. Everyone was sharing their recalls with each other. Some people had memories of each other and other people in our community, and it's really a very I don't know, what do you call it? Um, their testimonies, when you listen to them together or separately, they all jive together, you know? So for me as an investigator, organizer, advocate, that's kind of like the jackpot, the smoking gun. It's like I can be standing with Arkeem Ra and Chastity Campbell right there by the Montauk Lighthouse by the cliff. And Arkeem is crying and having a memory with her about how when she first got to the base and they were both young children, he'd already been there for a couple years, so he's a little bit older. And she was crying and she was locked up in her cage and she was saying, my parents are going to come find me. They're going to rescue me. I'm going to get out of here. And he said he was a butthole to her. He was saying, no, they're not. They're never going to find you, because he was so hurt and traumatized already himself. He was taking it out on her.
Mhm.
And he was saying, do you remember that? And she was like, yeah, I do. And he was like crying and apologizing. And she was like crying and accepting it and hugging him. It's like these people aren't like making that up for my benefit spontaneously right in front of me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like where I'm coming from at the level of like the stuff that I see. I mean, and that's just the in my face part, not to mention the more paranormal, supernatural aspects.
Right. And this has been going on for years, as you said, Brian, right?
Well,
Montauk.
with the Montauk Project, that goes back to 1943 Philadelphia experiment, and then post World War II. When it's really the Nazis, the space Germans, the Antarctic Germans, who later moved home base to Mars and then beyond with the breakaway civilizations. They've really been in charge ever since World War II. That's what the UFO flyovers over the Washington, D.C. Capitol buildings were all about.
Right. I wanted to talk to you about that. Now the Montauk, thing that's going on for years, it's still going on. I know there's like you can mix in Manchurian candidates, right, Brian? That
Well,
maybe
that's because,
are
yeah, well,
great moisture trained to do a specific job or a hit. Are they still doing that? I mean,
yes, unfortunately, until we have 100% bottom up, top down, and hopefully in this case, top down, bottom up reform, but we're really all pushing from the bottom up, to reform the space programs, because what's been integral to them this whole time has been MK Ultra mind control. Because, like I said, the space the Germans won World War II, and so Operation Paperclip is the most blatant, obvious, in our face example of that. Like, why would he import all these Germans and then put them in leadership positions of leadership like
yeah,
Werner von Braun,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
You know, um, and the NASA space programs, for example. It's because they really won World War II.
Wow.
And
I've never heard it put that way, but
no, no, that's the truth.
there's
Many people have said that. Laura Eisenhower and others speak to this.
yeah,
And so MK Ultra and mind control has been always been part of their kind of mad scientist playbook, unfortunately, because at the end of the day, the level they were putting in, they were kind of manifesting here on Earth a very nasty Draco reptilian version of hundred of as much mega exploitation
Mhm.
as you can do. And the way that these programs have found the best way to really exploit people, to exploit any of us really, is to mind control us. Because in doing so, you can create basically made to order Manchurian candidates who have very specialized missions, mission training and parameters. Like you might want to have someone be an assassin, or you might want them to be a sex kitten honeypot, or you might want them to be a courier, a spy who can remember things and then I remember it identically and then repeat it back for their handlers.
Mhm.
You might have people who you want to make super soldier, like not like stealthy assassins, but just like all around weapons specialists for heavy combat.
Yeah,
And
Brian, I've had a hard time in the past when somebody says that they were a super soldier and they were fighting in outer space and they were fighting battles on Mars and everything. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it until the time travel element entered in. And what happened was these super soldiers are put into time travel and they go forward in time and they're fighting these battles and then they come back. Am I right, Brian?
yeah, it's like when you watch a Marvel movie, there's a lot of disclosure in them. And you're watching Wolverine in particular, he kind of like they have him jump around in time and space,
Right.
right? Your individual soul that's really who you are, your spark, that's you. You might experience in a way this stuff in linear time, right? The soul, but consciously it's all chopped up and edited. I mean,
Right.
you're jumping around, and then at the end of the day, time and space don't really exist. I mean, we experience it through the 3D linear time space construct, but when you truly understand that, and it's hard for me to wrap my mind around as a puny mortal, but if we truly understand that time and space do not exist, that means that it can truly be all points of time and space can be interconnected.
That's the most interesting thing I found out in my visit. I didn't have a visit. I mean, she visited me in Sedona in 2010 in October. And I asked her how old she was. And she was a, Japanese gal about mid 30s, I would estimate. But she was real friendly. She said we were supposed to meet, and that's what the name of my book is all about. That's not about that story. It's just the element of the title. But she told me, and I asked her how old she was. She turned to me and she was real fierce. And she says, when are you humans going to get it? There is no time. There are no age. There is no age. And then she stopped, like she slipped. And I looked at her and I said, wow, that's a slip. She was an ET humanoid. And I know that because she visited 5 months later at my house with my cousin. And I sat on the porch and she brought two younger guys, and which are probably I'm sorry to say this, I'm not sorry to say, but they're probably my kids or my grandkids. And she was my daughter. And that's why she said we were supposed to meet, and she knew me and I didn't know her. But that's where I learned that this is all possible, that there is no time there. And then she'd have come right out of her mouth. But history as we know it it's not exactly how we know it, even biblical history and
Oh
everything.
no, no, none of that is correct. None of that's correct. And it's I mean, yes, and the Bible has been so distorted. It makes me really sad. King James, my understanding, was a 33rd degree Freemason and demonologist. The reason why um the Bible that we know in the Western world has, I think it's 66 books versus the Ethiopian Bible, which has 88,
Right.
is because the Freemasons and King James's ilk hadn't totally conquered that area of Africa to be able to intercept and prevent the those to have those books removed from what they were enshrining as the Bible.
Yeah.
And there's so many more distortions. And then now it's throwing Mandela effects. Many people in our audience, if you go to, oh, I forget the chapter now, if it's Isaiah 6:13, or it's the one where it used to say, and the lion shall lay down with the lamb. If you go to your Bible on that you have in your house, Dave, any one of them, and look it up in your hard print Bible, it'll now say, and the wolf shall lay down with the lamb.
Yeah. Yeah, I got that line before. Yeah. I think this thing, and it started off like, you didn't start off, but Hitler was in contact with a Vril. The Vril, and they were long-haired, blonde. One of them was the she was the leader.
Maria Orsic. Well,
Yeah.
well, what it was is probably like these renegade Palladians from Aldebaran. They were psychically transmitting information to Maria Orsic and her fellow beautiful, lovely Vril Damen.
Mm.
Okay, and this was in a Germany that was, I think, pre-Nazi or a rising Nazi Germany, like 30s Germany. And so it wasn't like they were necessarily there because they wanted to help Hitler. It was they were reaching out to their starseed, Maria Orsic, who was living in Germany. And then the German Reich picked her up. And then, now the Nazis have access to the technology. But I like to make those distinctions so people don't think it's, oh, these Palladians just wanted to help the Nazis. It wasn't quite that simple.
Yeah, I heard of this. It was a lot of, ideology or political stuff going on there too. But I heard there were some people in Berlin, northern Berlin, who said that they saw 12 people, like, and Hitler, a couple of his top generals, a couple of top scientists, and these women with the Vril Society escorting them to a ship north of Berlin. They got on this ship and they took off. And then they apparently must have went to South America or Antarctica. And so that's where I guess the Nazis live on. And in Antarctica, uh, that's where we don't know, where history's been taught to us differently. We don't know the truth about Antarctica.
Well, I'll tell you what I know from all my research and contacts and friends in the community. Really from all our friends in the community.
Yeah.
They went from um, South America and Argentina to the moon with Lunar Operations Command, and then to Mars with lots of underground bases there because it's you can be on the surface, but it's not a good place to live all the time when you can just go underground instead of getting pelted with rocks and sandstorms and hot and cold. Well, not hot, but mostly cold from like 50 degrees Celsius down to like, I don't know how cold it gets there at night, but apparently cold enough it froze the Germans' greenhouses up there. And that's information that James Rink was just sharing recently on a broadcast. Um, and from there, with their bases on Mars, this is where you hear a lot of people talk about working or being serving in Mars Defense Forces. And it was the Germans basically pacifying the Martian wildlife and humanoid uh, civilizations to then put in their own bases to have a launching pad to then reach out further into the stars, and then that's where you get talks of Nachtwaffen and Darkfleet,
Right.
the
Yeah.
German space fleets.
Yeah. And that's where I had a hard time wrapping my head around all that knockoff and super soldiers. But I've heard, and Buzz Aldrin, one of the astronauts, they asked him a question in a news conference. They said, "Did we go to the moon?" And he sits there and he goes, "No, we didn't go to the moon. It was all staged here on ground, in the studio."
So
Uh,
that's a he's still lying. What it was is we've been to the moon and then we got turned back. And that's where you've got the famous ham radio exchange where the ham radio operators here on Earth who are listening in to the broadcast between ground control and the Apollo astronauts going to the moon was apparently they said like we've got an issue here. Okay, we're seeing these craft. Okay, and then ground control said switch over to B channel, and then the public never heard it, but the ham radio operators heard the astronauts describing these large craft on the rim of a crater,
mhm.
5 or 6 of them, basically ominously kind of bearing down on them. And what happened was NASA, and the Earth governments were left with a conundrum of, well, we can't let the rest of, everyone on Earth know that there's this hostile ET presence on our moon with spaceships that could wipe us out with our little tin can technology, right? Um, you know, so that's when they brought Stanley Kubrick in to basically, help make up for like 12 hours of lost footage that, and then when people then see the Stanley Kubrick moon landing footage and they rightly say, well, that's fake, it's fake, just because that footage is fake doesn't mean all of space is fake. The moon is fake. The earth is flat. We can't go to the moon. You know what I mean? Like that's where people, it's like they just took the bathwater, lit it on fire with gasoline, and then threw it out the window off a 100-story building. Like, no.
Yeah, we're still talking about the history is not what we think it is. And the moon, is the moon, Brian, a base? Is it hollow? Do ETs live in that on that moon base?
Yeah, apparently the moon is ET technology. It's hollowed out. And that's why when space agencies hit it with basically projectiles,
Right.
it rings like a gong for like minutes on end, like all the way through. It's why people from, Alex Collier and everyone else, they point out, rightly so, that the moon is in geosynchronous orbit with us, like tidally locked at the exact right distance to have solar eclipses that cover up the sun just right.
Hmm. Right. It
And
does.
apparently the reason why it's there is the moon helps them to alter and modify our seasons and our environment in a way that they want to do it. For the one thing, it is like a protector. It helps protect from like spacecraft, as it swings around us, and that's great. Um, additional source of illumination. There's the whole tidal locking and all that. But then if it's like offset in certain ways, that might also, be used to affect Earth and our tilt possibly. So for all these reasons, it's apparently why. Oh, and then there's also technology in the moon, where the moon's used as a broadcast station to influence Earth. And in general, those influences have been negative because they've been um, Anunnaki or Jahami is like the proper name of that grouping of ETs, um, and the negative Draco reptilians.
Now, could the moon be that planet X or Nibiru they've always talked about that comes by the Earth? It used to, and then you hear these ancients say that we didn't have a moon until what, 100,000 years ago, or I don't know the exact.
Right, right, right. Yeah, those are right. The pre-Selenians, and is what they're called because the before the moon. But I don't know how far back they go, but yeah, that's exactly right. There's records of times on Earth when the moon was not here. And so yeah, I'm fine to wrap my head around the moon being an artificial satellite. I mean, if there are other ETs that we think can possibly make Dyson spheres where you can create enough structure to surround a sun and harvest its or a star and harvest its energy, then how hard is it to make a moon-sized rock?
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah, and a Dyson spear that they have out in outer space in some of these planets. Now, these super soldiers, I've talked to several of them, and they fought like reptilians and other ETs. Who are the ETs that run the moon, and who controls us mostly? What ETs are associated with us more close than others, and who are our enemies? Like they always say reptilians, but not all of them are bad.
No.
Brian.
What's because let's zoom in a bit more for a higher resolution, more granularity.
Okay.
Because you're going to have the ETs who are what we call service to self, and those are negative alien agenda, the NAA
Right.
ETs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then you're going to have the more positive ETs. Those would be more the Galactic Federation types. A lot of these are positive Pleiadians, Lyrians, Sirians, Vegans, Andromedans, Arcturians. Okay, but you're going to have negatively oriented ones as well. And so that's part of what makes all this confusing. Um, and then you've got, for example, the breakdown, and this is per like John Whitberg. He describes it like this, and he and others. You've got like the galactic center of the Milky Way. Those are the oldest stars, the oldest planets, the oldest life. And at one point, Lyra, which is towards the center there, um, they were like a galactic garden of Eden, full of like humanoids, like us, cat people, lion people, rabbit people, probably dog people, all these types of humanoids, um, living relatively peacefully and with varying levels of technology. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these very large, militarized, powerful, well coordinated Draco reptilians come into the star system. And they realize quickly that these rabbit and cat people taste really good. And so I like my favorite is that meme run. It's like people just like running like crazy.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It was kind of like that. That's known as the Lyran diaspora.
Right.
And then they spread from Lyra to the other star systems, and then that led to the Orion Wars.
Yeah.
And then part of that is these Draco reptilians and some of these nastier Zeta reticulan grays who they had enslaved, taking over vast regions of space.
Right.
And eventually, and that was the Siakar Draco reptilian empire. And then somewhere also known as the Orion group, because they also have the Orion Greys
Mhm.
and negatively oriented ETs from that region.
What
And that's
are the
what
Pleiadians and the tall whites actually protecting us from these evil ETs? My book, sci-fi.
some are,
It's
some are.
That's what I wrote about it in the sci-fi book, Brian.
Well, yeah. Well, what it is the more positive ones. A lot of them they've engaged in what's known as like the Starseed exchange program. Okay, or maybe that's not the exact name, but basically it's many of the positive ET races and God's source even was faced with a predicament a long time ago regarding Earth. And that's, well, maybe not God's source, but the positive ETs were faced with a predicament of, well, how do we change this? How do we change what's going on Earth if Earth has always been under Draco reptilian rule? And then a couple 100,000 years ago, the Anunnaki came here to further exploit humanity and nerf us to mine gold for them. And so they kind of were renting or leasing us out as slaves from the Draco reptilians.
Okay. How
Okay,
about
with
the Eisenhower doctrine that he made with the ETs? He told them that said we can exchange technology. They can give them technology if they let them take DNA and eggs and sperm from us humans during abductions.
so you're referring to the 1954 Greada Treaty
Yeah.
under the Dwight, Eisenhower administration.
Hmm.
And I'm friends with Laura Eisenhower.
Right.
She's a great friend of everyone, and so many of us in the community. And she's done a lot to clear the tarnished legacy, unrightfully tarnished legacy of Eisenhower. Because while the 1954 Greada Treaty was signed under his administration, my understanding is it was signed largely behind his back. And he I think he might have even preferred the Valiant Thor proposal, the stranger at the Pentagon who lived
Right.
there for 4 years, apparently from 1950 to 1954, it might have been. And then you look at the Greada Treaty, was the Zeta Reticulan Greys were offering the Eisenhower administration advanced weapons technology and maybe other transportation like anti-gravity type technology, or technology that could be theoretically weaponized in exchange for being able to conduct limited experimentation upon American citizens.
Hmm.
And there's a couple other clauses that they were supposed to like report to the U.S. government how many people they're taking, who they're taking, what they were doing to them, etc.
Hmm.
Well, Valiant Thor, the stranger at the Pentagon, who came through Venus and might have like Pleiadian background, but apparently Venus has been colonized and settled by some of these ETs. He was here to represent the more Galactic Federation, more benevolent side of things, to say, okay, humanity, and via the Eisenhower administration, at least America, we won't give you any weapons technology, but we'll give you things like clean energy, advanced health technology, spiritual technology, and knowledge, so that you can become a better society and feed and clothe and care for everybody. And this was in the middle of the Cold War against the Ruskies.
Hmm.
And the Majestic 12 group, which doesn't never reported to any president and considers themselves above president because they have like cosmic clearance or majestic clearance at least, which is apparently above top secret presidential clearance.
Yeah, you might be right, Brian, about Eisenhower not knowing that the agreement was signed and sealed, even without him knowing about it, because his last speech, his farewell address, he said, everybody, he said, the fear is the main fear. He says, fear the military industrial complex.
Beware the military
Yeah,
industrial
right. Yeah.
military industrial complex.
So that kind of runs in line with what you're just saying about Eisenhower. I wanted to jump back to the moon real quick and just get a quick answer from you on that. Now, like Buzz Aldrin, and they said they didn't go to the moon. How many moon trips were there really? And when did they stop? Do you know
Well,
that?
they never stopped, and we don't need conventional liquid rockets or solid, rockets and liquid boosters to send us to the moon. Put, put, put. They've had the technology a long time. They've had what Andrew Basiago has and others have testified the arc rooms
Mhm.
or aeronautical repositioning chambers, also known as jump rooms, like at 999 Sepulveda Boulevard for a while. People talked about 30 Seconds to Mars. That's the name of a Jared Leto band
Mhm.
because he might have access to these programs because of the Hollywood Illuminati connections. And that's they have basically they're talked about as like being in you go in an elevator and you think you're in an elevator and it turns out you could step out of the elevator, you could be on the moon or Mars or somewhere else or in an underground base on some very very far away planet.
Right. I
and then
heard I
and
heard
then
the
you've got the
elite.
tic tac
Yeah.
then you got the tic tac type shuttle bus craft made by I think either probably Boeing and like Skunk Works, and then those might just be shuttlecraft where to shuttle people back and forth, and instead of just using the jump rooms. So that's just two right there ways that they go back and forth to this day, is what I'm told.
And that's why we don't have to do it publicly to go to the moon or prove that we're going anywhere, because there is this private space force or a space program that's headed up. And actually, Werner von Braun actually started some of that program. And you have the
Yes.
elites and you have the Pope, you have the kings and queens and the big money people that's in charge of the world, the New World Order, the cabal that has this space program. And I think they don't want disclosure, and that could be part of it too, where they don't want disclosure
Oh
because
no, they don't
they
want
don't
this.
they don't want us to know how they're manipulating us with technology, the technology they're using.
You don't want the cows on the farm to know that they're being harvested and led to the slaughter, and culled, ever. It's
Right.
it's not it's not it's just not good for trying to control to them the product. And so they have an end game that they've always been aiming for, whether they knew it or not, but the higher echelons probably, at a high enough level they do. They've always had the transhumanism negative depopulated timeline
Right.
in in mind because they thought they've always been told that they would get to rule over a vastly depopulated Earth and humanity.
Mhm. That rings a bell. Here about a month ago, President Putin of Russia, they asked him about these drones, and we're going to be getting into those. I want to tap your thinking about the drones and everything. But Putin actually come out and said, he smiled when he said, he's kind of a jokester at times, so you really can't believe him all the time. He said those UFOs are here to come here and eat us. He said they want to eat us for lunch. That's what
So
he
you
said.
said that joke. So you said that sounds very tongue in cheek for Putin.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
does like a lot. And then that's not even that's I call it Putin 2.0 because the Putin now is clearly swapped out from the 2009 KGB killer much thinner Putin. Now we have Winnie the Pooh Putin, Winnie the Putin.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
uh,
and I
on the
hope,
Ritz.
yeah, I just hope that that war can end because I think that's what the ETs are watching us, because we're killing each other in wars and there's
Well,
crime.
you have to have context to the Ukraine Russia war. It's not just out of nowhere. You first of all, Ukraine never existed until after World War II.
True.
Okay. Second of all, um, the state of the country of Ukraine as we know it now never existed in its incarnation until the 2014 Hillary Clinton State Department installed Zelensky. Okay, Zelensky, before becoming president of Ukraine and before being an entertainer on Ukrainian television, was a Ukrainian sex callboy for their Illuminati politicians and elite.
Mm, really?
Really.
That's
And
what I heard.
and
Putin's
and they
saying they're corrupt. He
yeah,
said Ukraine is corrupt and they're Nazis. Is that true?
yes, yes, literally neo-Nazi Khazarian mafia types.
Yeah.
And so what they did is they installed a neo-Nazi regime, and they allowed for the U.S. and whatever anti-Russia military to put in whatever bio um, warfare research facilities, bioweapons labs on Ukrainian territory, of which I've seen leaked documents indicating at least 14 that are tied to the US and Switzerland and all these other Western powers. And the deal is that Putin years ago, he said, we know why you're building bioweapons labs in Ukraine on the doorstep of Russia. A, it's so you can experiment on people with Russian, Slavic backgrounds to figure out what's the most effective weaponry, and then you can just be on our doorstep to unleash it. And we are not going to stand for this. And you must remove these bioweapons labs post haste. And he was blown off. Him and Russia, they were blown off for years and years and years. As 2014, he probably talked to him probably around 2016 area, and they said no. Okay. They didn't remove them. And so at a certain point, he went into the Ukraine. And now that he's gone in, he said, well, now that we're in here, are we going to just turn it back to like the neo-Nazi uh, US puppet state that hates our guts and is trying to kill us with bioweapons? And if they could, they'll park nuclear weapons on our doorstep next. Or are we just going to like take the land up to here, which is historically we can lay claim to and call it a day? That's basically what's going to happen. I mean, that's kind of like a General McGregor type perspective, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, I that's where history gets written without us even knowing it, the true history and what's going on between countries, leaders, and what they talk about in behind closed doors.
Well, it gets worse, Dave. It gets worse because I only mentioned the bioweapons labs,
Yeah.
the human trafficking
Yes.
that in Ukraine, the blood products that are being trafficked to achrome. I don't want to get as banned or anywhere, but
Adrenochrome.
that product. Yeah, okay, you can say it on your platform. Excellent. That stuff, Ukraine has been, and then all the Khazarian mafia Illuminati connections. It's been it's coming out to light, and I'm very optimistic under the new or the Trump administration that's properly installed publicly, because he never left from 2016, as far
I,
as I know. He's been commander in chief this whole time.
I heard that. Do
Yeah,
you have people who know that for sure, Brian? That's on
yeah.
the inside.
Well, this is the thing. If you are investigating and you're looking at as much eyewitness testimony and documentation and the video evidence and what everyone, to the best of your ability, that's all the conclusions I'm coming to. I didn't just arrive because I pulled them out of nowhere. And I like to consider all this stuff that I'm saying, it's actionable intelligence. You can act on it. It's much better to have an understanding of like the geopolitical historical situation that I laid out in terms of the 2014 Clinton State Department leading to the Zelensky installation. Okay, and on up to here. versus Russia is bad because it's invading Ukraine. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
there's a difference.
So what you're saying is that the 4 years, I guess, 2020 to 2024, Trump, he did have a staff. He did talk about having a staff in Mar-a-Lago, and he always talked about, meeting with his own staff during that time. And are you saying that most of these trials and hearings are all staged just for show, Brian?
No, no, no. I was saying a lot of these trials and hearings are happening behind the scenes, and that we're seeing a show in the foreground that's not really, it's not putting these trials and executions even, right in our faces, but they're leaking it out so that those of us who have eyes to see and ears to hear and we're paying attention, we know what's going on. When I see, like John McCain before he passed away for months and months on end with an ankle bracelet or an ankle brace on his right leg for months on end. And then one day he switches it to his left leg, and a reporter says, "Excuse me, Senator, I noticed your injured leg, your brace was on your right leg and you've been wearing it this whole time. Now it's on your left leg." He's like, Joe, my right leg just got tired. So I decided to swap it for a day.
Huh,
You don't swap your brace because your injury swap legs. You
right.
swap your tracking monitor, which they have these tracking boots because you want to switch it up. Sure.
Which takes me to human cloning and CIA mask, and also people that were taking they were taken to Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, and they were giving these military tribunals, and they were sentenced, and some of them were killed, and now there's like people play acting these people.
And clones. You've got clones and body doubles
Yeah, okay.
and CGI avatars can in combination with body doubles and masks and all of that.
So that's really going on now. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
I
something.
believe so. I believe so. When I see celebrities doing tweets like "help," like I'm not, they
Yeah,
won't let me leave. Like and they got people doing all the COVID co um, public releases, information releases saying so and so has gotten COVID, but they're quarantining, or they've got COVID and they've tested positive, or blah blah blah. Apparently, that's also code for like, are they've admitted to guilt and they're going to play ball, or they're not admitting guilt and they're going to be put on tribunal.
right.
And so there's many of these what I call proofs. My favorite one, it's a scientific proof. Okay, science. Um, you got these earthquake monitors that'll like depict like the globe, and then it'll show all the earthquake information around the globe.
Right.
And they're showing like there's some time there a couple of years ago, especially where we were seeing strings of earthquakes exactly or averaging 10 kilometers deep in like straight lines,
Yeah.
for like hundreds or not even 1,000 miles,
Right.
right? And then which may have lined up where all these underground tunnels and bases are.
Hmm.
Okay, so what that tells me is you want to talk about tunnel and underground base cleanup. That's a very clear indication of explosions
Yeah.
happening at the depth of these tunnels and locations of them.
Yeah. Just here south of me, they claim that, a lot of people heard explosions in the middle of the night. And there wasn't any, or they call it a sonic boom, but there wasn't any sonic boom, and there wasn't any earthquake. So what is making those boom sounds? I guess that's what you're talking about. These underground tunnels. It's all over the U.S. and all over the world, actually. I guess.
That's
Uh,
one possible cause of the boom sounds. I don't know about the ones
right.
behind you, but
Right.
other places, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's got us puzzled and confused, and that's why we never know the truth, because there's so many things that can cause this. Now, let's get to now. We have you talked to or heard of any humanoid ETs that are here walking amongst us, like Dr. David Jacobs talks about, and they're
Yep.
actually in Washington, D.C., and they're actually pushing their agenda? Brian, have you heard of any of that?
Well, so I mean, Valiant Thor back in the 1950s, but then
You doggy.
this is Mini.
Many, many.
It's one of Winnie the Wonder Dog's puppies, her daughters.
Yeah, I have a lot of guests who their pets have to make a showing. They have to come on and get a little bit of video take. Yeah, but
She's
that's
super cute. So
That just she seems like she's real sweet. Yeah.
yeah, so I believe that ETs and especially hybrids are already here. They're here all the time. They do walk among us. Um, what Christopher Jacobs, good friend and a presenter at the conference series, what he and Joanna Michaels, his partner, what they say is that a lot of the ETs for now, they have to abide by the angels unaware rule, which is it's like, in the Bible it says, be nice, be kind to strangers because you never know who you're talking to.
Right.
Well, if you're an ET and you're here on Earth and you're speaking to a human, at the point where the human realizes that you're an ET, you're not from around here, they, under certain rules and regulations, have to leave.
Yeah.
Now, an exception to that would be if, say, they're your star family, like your hybrid daughter, and they're here to visit you.
Mhm.
And then now at the point where realize, wait a second, are you an ET? You're not, and they might give you a wink and a nod. They don't have to just peace out immediately. But otherwise, like let's say, maybe you're at a famous rock concert or something like that, and an ET is breaking the rules because they're an admirer of Earth culture and they love that particular rock star or rock band, and
Mhm.
they show up, and then maybe there's someone who's like a human starseed, and they're there, and they're a big fan of Pink Floyd, and they're psychic, they're telepathic, or their third eye is open, and they look over and they realize, this guy wearing the Pink Floyd t-shirt next to me is dancing real funny. Their aura is weird. And I get a strange vibe off of them.
Yeah.
And then like that psychic person will talk to that ET, and the ET will realize that, like, oh geez, this person's they picked up on me. I'm not supposed to be here. They got to disappear. They peace out.
Yeah. Uh, Speaking of people that I have a friend of mine. He's a award-winning writer, and he wrote a book called The Trump Code. I had him on my show a couple of months ago. We might do a project together. I hope we do. He's a great writer, and I'd like to hook my wagon to his horse any day. But he talked about Trump being the time traveler because in 1892 there was a fellow named Lockwood. He wrote a book, Barron's Greatest Adventures, and he talked about his dad being president, and he talked about having a tall tower in New York City, and talking about being the president, of course. But that he sent the book to Trump, and Trump actually signed it and sent it back to him. And he said he might put that book in these gift bags that they give guests. He might put that,
And they
Trump.
should, and they should, because the deal is that I don't know if it's an uncle or a great uncle of Donald Trump, probably a great uncle, John G. Trump, I think was his name, was with the FBI who got to clean out Nikola Tesla's New York City apartment
Yeah,
at the time of his death. And so having access to those papers um, would, if anyone, is going to be able to time travel, it's people in the US government with, access to the Tesla's papers to take over from there. And remember that the 1943 Philadelphia experiment had already happened before Tesla died. So I guess the US government, at least sectors of it, they were already clued in that he had something to his technology.
yeah, and here's the funny thing that's going on now is that Elon Musk they become friends, him and Trump has said a lot of things in the last couple of years that comes true. Apparently, he knows he has a feeling for he's actually that type of person who can see things that are valuable in the future, and he can act
Well,
upon it. And it
well,
like
let's put it
Elon
this
Musk.
way. We already know that the bad guys have the chronovisor under the Vatican.
Hmm.
Okay. Per a testimony of one of the Jesuit priests or whoever, he talked about how the chronovisor enables the user to look forward and backwards into time and probably in different timelines. And here in the US, I think it's at Area 51. It's called the Looking Glass Project.
Yes, CIA.
Okay. Right. And so, and apparently Hillary Clinton was shown a timeline in 2016 where she became president. And so that's probably her shock was that she's like, she thought she was going to win
Mhm.
2016 because she was shown that in using the Looking Glass Project, I think. And what I think it is they showed her a timeline, but not necessarily this timeline or the timeline that happened as we know it.
So who's ever
It's
operating that machine, the looking glass can actually change it to whatever they want to.
not
How,
change it, not change it. They can look at different timelines and then maybe try to change it. And then that's where you get things like the Montauk Project or Project Phoenix comes in, is it was really a time traveling project where the bad guys were mind controlling little children with psychic powers to open up doorways in time and space to then send time soldiers through those doorways forward and backwards in time to mess up this timeline that we're in now.
oh,
And thankfully, a lot of that damage is being cleaned up and will be cleaned up.
yeah. It's strange how Elon Musk took up friendship with Trump, pretty much all of a sudden. But I heard that his ex-wife wrote a book, and they asked her about is Elon in ET or whatever. And she goes, he's strange. She said, yes, I believe he is different, and that's a possibility. She actually said that, his ex-wife. And then he wants to go back to Mars really bad. That's another indicator that he wants to travel. He wants to get up there. And then all the technology that he has, it is strange that all these people are coming together at one time. Brian, are we coming to the end of time, maybe?
Not end of time. We're coming to the end of an era, the end of a low point of humanity. And so we can transition into the golden age, right? And so the bad guys have been trying to steer us into their great reset, which is where we own nothing. We're eating Z bugs. We like it, blah, blah, blah. We're going to try to link up to the computer, the singularity, Ray Kurzweil, basically the Terminator Matrix Skynet
Mm,
um, vision for humanity. And that's what they've always wanted, but they're not going to get that. And so because they're not going to get it, that's the end of their wannabe era. That's not going to happen. And this is the dawning, literally, of the age of Aquarius, higher vibration, the revelation of secrets, the darkness being revealed and cleansed away. And with the truth that helps to position all of us, or the truths that are to be revealed now, that they will position all of us to then move towards our Star Trek future when they can tell us the truth about ETs and don't have to hide them. Now, we can learn more about the spaceships and the anti-gravity and the 0 point energy and on and on and on. And now not only do we know about it, we can implement that. What's going to happen to our society when we don't have to pay huge electricity bills, if any, ultimately?
right.
But we've got replicators where we can make our own stuff. You don't need to Amazon stuff halfway across the planet all the time to get a pair of tactical gloves. Okay. That's going to change us greatly. And then even more important than just the economic, societal, political stuff, it's the spiritual evolution of humanity. When we get to embrace the truth of who we really are and where we're going. And now a lot of this, oh my gosh, am I going to go to hell? Or, Allah's right. No, Buddha's right. All that goes away.
Right. It does. And actually Trump talks about the golden years coming up, so he knows a little bit something about that. You were alluding to the drones. Let's get into the drone thing now. My brother has been taking pictures and I've been posting them on Facebook and Instagram and everything. He's been taking a picture of something that shows up every evening about 6 o'clock in the western sky, and it actually moves into place. He watches it move into place and it stops. And then also he's got a picture of two little craft down below it. And he's taking it with a cell phone. So he's not getting very good pictures. He's not a photographer. So he said he switches it on video and he just loses, all kinds of,
Yeah, no, but I see similar phenomenon.
yeah,
That's real. Those are basically craft. And what it is the positive ETs with the Galactic Federation already told Dr. Courtney Brown and his team at the Farsight Institute on November 13th, I think it was 2024, during one of their Farsight ET boardroom meetings, that in very soon, from November 13th, 2024, there will be worldwide sightings of UFOs in the skies. Farsight Institute published that boardroom hearing on November 15th. And then 3 days later, on November 18th, I think it was, according to Dr. Brown, that was the worldwide sightings.
Mhm.
So that there you go. People are always bagging on people for making predictions that don't come true. Well, they made a prediction and it came true within 3 days. And what it is it's the positive ETs introducing themselves as non-threatening and as undeniable a manner to worldwide humanity as possible.
Right.
And the deep state does not like it. They want us to be afraid of ETs. They wanted to have their Project Bluebeam fake ET invasion, and this is upsetting the apple cart. Because instead of all of us fish being in an aquarium and then freaking out when the other side tries throwing in a big nasty fish from space, the good guys, they're essentially putting themselves as like fish in like the plastic bag with their own water, floating in on the surface, not for days, weeks, it's going to be months, maybe even years. Hopefully, not doesn't take that long on end. And I think they're going to bring bigger and bigger craft to just hover above us until we acclimate as the fish in the aquarium and don't freak out because this scary looking fish, it's not that scary. It's not going to hurt us. It's been there for days and weeks and months. They mean us well, even maybe. But let's try talking to them.
Yeah, I
And then
think
that's where we're going.
yeah, you hear talk about the ETs are fed up with the government not disclosing to the people and not being honest with us, and so they're showing themselves, like you said, and they're waving at us from a distance. And soon, one day, you said like the larger craft that'll come over and really fly over the cities real close, and people will know. But here we go again. The government says they are not anything to worry about. They're not enemy, these drones and these craft, and they also said that they there's something that we shouldn't have to worry about. Just just don't pay no mind to them. But then there was a Senate meeting that was happened a couple of weeks ago, and a senator come out and talked to James Fox, the documentarist of UFOs and everything, and he interviewed with him. And it's strange that he interviewed with him, and he asked him. He said he I forget the senator's name, but there's about 14 of them in the hearing, and there's two experts there telling them what all this the drones and all these orbs were about. And he's come out, he was really worried looking. He's looking down his desk, and James Fox says, "What's the problem?" He said, I've heard some things, and he said, I can't really talk about it, but he said, I've heard some things that's going to keep me up at night for a long time. He said, I've never heard of such things that we just heard in this meeting. And it was a Senate Arms hearing, Arms Committee hearing. And that he said that they talked about all this stuff. And he said it's concerns us all. He said all senators walked out of that room, they was pale white and they was scared to death, what
So
they.
let me say something. To me, the Senate Armed Services hearings are a joke. They always have been. Um, and that sounds like a huge scare tactic. I mean, first of all, I already know more than all of those senators combined, unless they've been shown these bases, as far as I'm concerned. So they're known what they're told, and then who knows what they're told. And then the fact that, well, I can't talk about it, but it's really scary and concerning, and we're all scared and concerned, but I can't talk about it. That to me, it's like knowing what I know. I think the senators, they should be scared, most of them, because most of them are compromised.
Yeah.
But for us, Joe and Jane public, I think that we should actually be quite thrilled.
Mhm.
I mean, we're not totally out of the woods, but we're heading in the right direction. And if there are things that this new administration is doing that we don't like, we should call it out. The things that we do like, call that out too.
I think we're
But
a
yeah,
transparent administration this time around. I hope Trump comes across with his promise to explain what the drones are. Uh, Breaking this down, Brian, I want your sense on this. Uh, I think the drones, we have our own drones up there
yeah.
spying on the other shape-shifting drones from the
But they're
ET.
not spying. What they're doing is they're trying to distract away and then sow confusion and fear. Because then some of the negative reverse engineered drones have been shown as spraying stuff.
Yes. Hmm.
And people in wildlife have been getting sick, and then you've had the chem fog.
Right.
So to me, those are the negative secret space program and military. and ET elements trying to muddy the waters. It's kind of like the good fish are trying to introduce themselves, and then the bad fish say, "Well, we can play that game," and then they jump in and squirt squid ink all over the place, and then we think, "Look, they're all jerks. It's an invasion." It's like, well, it's like, is it, or did we just get trolled by the losers who are trying to upset the apple cart because they don't want disclosure?
Well, there's a lot of things in the air that I see. We have helicopters that go up and they check them out. And then we have jets that chase these orbs. And then we have our own drones up there, like you said, what they're doing. And then we have shape-shifting drones that the ETs back engineered. But of course, there was a couple of colleges who said that they can make zero energy and they can make anti-gravity, propulsion. And they said they can stay aloft for 7 or 8 hours. And because our typical drones can only stay up for an hour. So they're up all night long. These drones are flying around. And then you have the orbs, in which are probably spaceships or ET ships, right? And then you
Yeah.
got the plasmoids that are big and they just stick around and they those are probably portals. Can you make some sense of that, Brian, for me?
Yeah, the more the plasmoids and the light ships, I would consider the higher dimensional stuff and the more positive ETs in general. Although orbs doesn't have to necessarily be a craft, it could be like an ET being inside of it as well, apparently, or it's spiritual, like a ghost. So any type of being can be an orb, and it's just manifesting itself, and it's how we're perceiving it in 3D space. But um, and then the in terms of being able to stay up off 0 point energy for 7 or 8 hours, I mean, the real stuff could probably stay up indefinitely.
Right,
And
but they
and
just
that's even
travel.
reverse engineered.
They travel at night. That's what they do, and they actually come out of the water. They
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
Coast Guard has actually got video of them coming
Because they
out.
have bases. They have bases underwater is why.
Right. And are those ET drones that are coming up out of the water, Brian?
It's probably a mix because you got secret space program, which is human level, but using reverse engineered ET technology, but it's still being operated and maintained by humans at the end of the day. I think there is that, but you got to look when you see the news reports, especially in the US news at least, they're always focusing, or they were for the longest time, on drones in New Jersey.
Right.
Okay. And yeah, you got these high-tech drones and they come up out of the water. Maybe they came from an ET base, maybe they came from a human secret space program base, whatever. But that's just drones in New Jersey. What about light ships and other craft and plasmoids, Christian Dior bag UFOs, as they're calling them,
Right.
all over the whole
Yeah,
world?
there. Yeah. So that kind of, and they said they used their frequency guns on these drones, and they said they had no effect. They leave no heat signature. They leave no frequency to follow. So
So
these,
no heat signature. It's generally that's like an indication of like 0 point energy and anti-gravity.
right, right. So I guess with all this going on, what do you think's going to be the end result of all these craft flying around, and how's it going to end with our government and us? Are we going to hear the truth, disclosure? Uh, uh,
Yeah. Yes. If we, I mean, those of us who are already pushing for it and know the truth, we already know the truth. We're just sharing it with everyone else. It's not like no one knows the truth. There's a leading edge, bleeding edge vanguard, if you will, that
I know
is
that.
already in contact with ETs, can speak with them through our telepathic friends. They visit us in our dreams, astral project, visit them, remote view, and bilocate. So that's already out there. Okay. Um, what's going to happen is, I think, with this new administration, as they release information on the JFK stuff, the 9/11 stuff, eventually the scamdemic and a bunch of other stuff and the underground bases, it's naturally going to happen where people are just overall, people are already becoming more aware than where we were even 2 years ago, which was
Right.
5 or 10.
Yeah, I feel vindicated, don't you?
Well, I mean, talk about vindicated. Last year, at the beginning of the year, I told my mother and my one brother, second oldest, Jason, I'm the eldest of the three idiot sons. Hey, mom, Jason, I'm going to throw a UFO conference later this year. And Jason goes, UFO conference, whatever, and storms off. And then within the year in November, we've got worldwide UFO sightings.
Yeah.
I mean, how much more vindicated? I'm only going to get more vindicated when they land and I've got a selfie with these ETs flying in their ship saying, "Hey, Jason," you know, like,
I keep talking. I talk to I try to talk to these ETs that have visited me throughout my life, and even up to now, I have some paranormal activity that happens. They never leave you. That started at 13 years of age, and I went up to this point, and that's why I'm a strong believer, and I want to be enlightening in people about this topic and this subject. And I'm glad this is starting to come out a little bit. I just hope that all turns out well for us. I feel it will. I don't think they're out to hurt us. They never have hurt me yet. And, so, I've had some,
some of them are out to hurt us.
yeah.
Some of them are out to assist, and some of them are want to assist for the sake of, maybe more just like assist humanity because it's a spiritual thing, and that's truly positive. And then there are others who want to assist, but then, well, fine, let's liberate humanity away from the Dracos. But if we could guide humanity down this certain transhumanism route, maybe we could take advantage later.
Mhm.
So it's literally it's getting that granular. I just want to say it's not just black and white. There's like all sorts of shades and contingencies to throw in there that most people haven't even thought about yet.
Before we close the show, I wanted to talk to you about this. You said earlier that the moon has some control. I know it has control over, our tides and all this other stuff. And might have some control over our weather. What do you think about what happened on the East Coast in North Carolina and in Georgia and Tennessee and in Florida?
Yeah. Well, that wasn't the moon. That was the NextRad and SBX1 um, uh, microwave frequency installations, and also the shipborne um, uh, basically they're basically microwave generators that are ionizing the atmosphere, and they're able to pulse it in a certain way to steer wind and thunderstorm patterns. And all of that was in full effect. I and many others were posting the satellite imagery of the pulses and the strobes into the atmosphere in sync with the storm as it was being like bouncing up from Florida all the way up to the Tennessee, you know.
And does this also come from Antarctica, the big giant machine they have underneath, in which
That's a neutrino detector. That and not in this case so much for the weather. That I think is more for deep space communications detection, and then also as like a quantum weapon, but that's not necessarily weather warfare. Weather warfare is more here in the US and off sea, pulsing the ionosphere to um
is ARP
base
still involved? Is ARP still involved in that part?
HARP, well, yes, but what I the other psychics that I talked to, they said it wasn't HARP that was used. And then looking at all the radar satellite imagery, to me, it's the SBX ones and the NextRad facilities.
Okay, one last question. California fires. You're from California, right? Uh,
Oh, I'm a East Coast. I'm a first generation Chinese American guy from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York.
is it-
And that was the first half of my life. And then I moved out to California, lived there for 27 years, and here I am now.
yeah.
And I'm
What do
49.
you think about those fires in around Hollywood, LA? Is it associated with Maui? Could we say
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely, yes. Because of the pattern of government negligence and draconianism, heartlessness. Um, the every now and then you got footage of like a car where it's literally melted down to the engine block. The aluminum engine block is liquefied and is running down the street like as a puddle that then re-solidifies. And then the car is directly underneath a tree, and the tree is mostly intact,
Yes.
or like the blue roof houses. And the reason why it's indicative of the microwave energy beams and laser weapons that don't affect certain colors or surfaces. And also, it's consistent with the Paradise, California fires, where you've got 20 plus year California firefighter veterans testifying to people literally looks like they were hit with a death ray in their cars.
Yeah.
Because whereas a normal forest fire, people are like in the car and they, I guess they die of heat and suffocation, but they're not like charred, crispy critter.
Right.
Whereas in the Paradise fires, they noted there were people, they were like almost like charred down into ash in their the car seats and
Mm.
in multiple cars and buses, and it was not normal.
We don't hear that on the news media or the fake news, whatever.
Well, YouTube bans it and censors it. It's hard to find.
Yeah, I would imagine, but it just so happens to be in the area of Hollywood, and which is part of the cabal. And that's strange that they're hurting their own kind if they're doing that.
Well, yes and no. Not yes and no. You got to understand the way they think. They don't think the way normal human beings think. Oh, we're hurting our kind, but we're burning out the normies. So, you know, two, three losses, but five gains. It's okay. No, what it is what I understand is they have a lot of their own evidence to burn up. If they burn up everyone's houses and mansions in the area, that's nice for BlackRock and Vanguard, who's owned by a lot of these elites, to swoop in and land grab for cheap.
Like Maui, yeah.
What Christopher Jacobs and Joanna Michaels, what their I think it was a Sasquatch source telepathically relayed to us, was that the cabal, they've made a lot of promises to a lot of negative ETs and other groupings, like human groupings, and they're not able to pay off on those promises in exchange for whatever favors. And so this is a land grab to then say, hey, here's have some of this property. And
Mm.
so some of these ships and orbs in that area, Christopher Jacobs and Joanna was saying, their sources are saying may have been flying around to scout the region for their land grab.
Yeah. Now, we don't have to say this is for entertainment purposes only because there's been a lot of witnesses on the ground in California and LA who said they don't know how the fire started. It just started out in the middle of nowhere. And then a lot of witnesses talk about how furious the fires are and the wind. It was timed just with the winds, Santa
Right.
winds.
So you got the 99 plus mile an hour gusts. So Santa Ana winds in
Oh,
January. Okay, which I lived in LA. I don't remember Santa Ana winds in January. I don't know, I mean, that's just me, but I don't remember hot gusts of wind or fast gusts of dry wind in January.
yeah.
Um, and then there are people who've been caught for arson, and a lot of them have been undocumented or illegal immigrants, you know, probably with criminal backgrounds in some cases. And then I would suspect that there is some degree of weather warfare to help whip up the winds. And in addition to arson, there might be some level of directed energy weapons.
Right.
And so when you combine all of that, it's no one thing. But then you add the government neglect of having emptied out the reservoirs, turning off the power so that the firemen didn't have any water that they could pump out of the fire hydrants because the pump system was down, all sorts of stuff. They didn't know how to take seawater and get it out of the ocean to put out Pacific Palisades. 10 miles across of LA at least is burned right now.
Yeah.
10 miles, $150 billion, $150,000 million of damage.
And I
And
heard the government wants those oceanfront houses or wherever
of
they were
course,
burned out. Yeah.
Newsom has already tweeted something about how the government is going to ensure that a portion of the rebuilt buildings or housing will be low income and immigration centers and stuff. And
Mhm.
it's like, really? Like, how do you get to just make that decision? Like, people are still like crying over the ashes, and you, Governor Newsom, are just determining what's going to go up.
I hope that him and the mayor, what's her name?
Karen Bass,
Bass. Yeah, I was
who
thinking,
signed off on defunding the LA Fire Department by $17.5 million several months prior to this catastrophe, while allowing the top fire chief and reservoir water district manager outrageous pay, 400,000 plus dollars.
oh. Okay, I guess we'll close the show, Brian. It's always interesting to talk to you. I mean, you have, every question I ask you, you have knowledge of what's going on, and you have a connection of people who give you that feed and that information. That's great. Always enjoy that with you, and you offer us options. What makes us think. That's the important thing. the higher ups, the elites are trying to confuse us with everything, but at least we have the options there to choose from, and we can watch as history or time goes on how they occur again and again and again. But a lot of people are just looking down at the ground, and 50% of the people just don't really care, and that's sad. If we all got involved and started caring about what's going on, that'd be different. Brian Singh, tell us a little bit about what your next moves are going to be and what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, I'm going to continue to do my best to help awaken people past the 3D matrix to see the 4 and 5D, the fun stuff, so that it's not so depressing that people want to continually take the blue pill. That's why I'm so glad to be on here. Thank you for sharing your platform with me. A lot of the questions you ask are great, so it allows me to, hopefully educate the audience to the best I can.
I can talk
And
to you another 2 hours, but that's going to be too lengthy. I try
well,
to,
have me back. I'd love to be back.
but yeah, I'll
Um,
give you back. It's been, we over an hour and a half we've been talking, and it just seems like it just goes by. And I got so many other things to ask you. So I'll have you back. You're a great guest, and I know people love you, and so, and you're an enlightening guy. And I just like it. I will put your website and what you're doing on the
yes.
narrative on the posting.
Full full disclosure movement.org is a website to the upcoming 2025 Full Disclosure Now conference. It's going to be at the lovely Serrata Beach Resort this coming July 15th to 18th. That's in Florida, St. Pete Beach.
I got it right there.
Yep. Yep, exactly. And we're already selling the Super Soldier early bird tickets for individuals and couples passes.
Mhm.
And very soon we're going to have the 4 evenings. We have special event dinners. Those tickets will be going up soon. And if anyone would like to volunteer or get involved with the conferences or the full disclosure movement, please reach out to me directly. My email is Brian underscore Tseng. That's Tseng, my last name, at yahoo.com. Or you could find me on Facebook at Brian Tseng, the Solar Bee,
Mhm.
with my nickname because I'm so heavily shadow banned. Send me a direct message. We'll go from there.
I'm
Thank you.
shadow banned too, but they take my numbers away on Facebook. I've had 3,300. Facebook is good for me. My people take care of me on Facebook. So, but now they drop the numbers half. I can almost see 50% just knocked off.
The throttling, the censorship, the banning, the shadow banning. It's
Yeah,
maddening. And that's why myself and others were looking at launching our own platform, which I'd love to have you be part of. You and Strange Reality would be
I
great.
I'd love to. I'd love to work with you, Brian. You're great, and you're very knowledgeable, and you're helping everybody, and they don't really know it, but you're enlightening people, and that's why I like having you on the show and other people who do the same thing. But Brian Singh, thank you so much, and good night to everybody. And this has been Dave Emmons with the Strange Reality Show, and hope you enjoy.